couple other things I want to get into. This is a. Are you praying? Authorities arrest a woman for silently praying outside an abortion clinic. That was over in the UK. Um, so this woman is, just by praying, she's raising a protest, and she was arrested. And this, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this. It's not very clear from the clip here, but there was a father, Frank Pavone, and he was recently he was recently defrocked by the Pope. He takes a very strong abortion stance. He had posted some the real issue is that he posted some graphic images on Facebook or social media talking about abortion, which is a very graphic thing, and he was expressing pro-life views in very graphic detail, and therefore he was defrocked. What they call that is laicized, and I actually like the term. I think if we were to look at where the word comes from, laicized, it sounds like you are being cut down to laity, laicized. And I'd have to look into the etymology of that word. Does anybody have any comments on any of this before we move on?
Back to the Christian flag at the January 6th riots.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that also kind of be breaking the third commandment, as in taking God's name in vain? Or do you think that it could possibly just be bad place, wrong place, wrong time?
You know, we as Christians, and that's an excellent thought, Dave. As Christians, we should always be very careful about taking the Lord's name in vain, whether it's done purposely or in foolishness. So that's a good point. We want to be careful not to take the Lord's name in vain, and that's one of the points that Dad was making with, be careful that they can't say evil of you.
Yeah.
So all this is just to show the lay of the land that we're not in a particularly friendly culture to us as Christians right now. Let's go to the next slide. Wake up. There we go. So how do we respond? Do we seek revenge? We could pass legislation. We've already addressed the FACE Act. Is that really helping us out? I would say it's not. Or will we remember our primary weapons? What are our primary weapons? Covenant renewal worship, prayer, worship, and song. The battleground is everywhere, including our churches, our homes, and the public square. So I have some thought questions for you. Was it a good thing that the early Christians were persecuted? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes, because we have results after that, because the God press and church grows, and there was run away from Jerusalem, and no, because there was suffering. Yeah, so, but they pay the price, and the God uses for growing church. Yeah.
All things work together for good.
Yes.
Yeah.
According to James, temptation is good. My brethren, count it exceeding joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing that the trying of your faith bringeth forth patience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then there's the Tertullian quote, "The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church."
Right. And in a couple slides, I have something that's pretty relevant to that, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. But let's just keep that in mind, that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. The church is losing ground. how might God use this? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I forget what general said it, but it's kind of like we're surrounded. It's like good, we can attack in any direction because there's so much that we can do, and also kind of like the fact that our enemy is so big kind of makes it more exciting, I guess, because it's just. I believe you kind of know what I'm getting at.
Yes. We're surrounded. Good, we can attack in any direction. I like that.
Isn't that a patent?
It's becoming more and more clear who the enemy is and who the good guys are. We might still find it difficult to decipher from time to time, and we'll get a little bit into that as well in a couple of slides. I have another one. If we here in excuse me, what city do we live in? If we here in Somersworth, New Hampshire, were scattered, could that be a good thing? And that's something that we don't like to think about. It's something I've been struggling with. The more roots that I put down here, and I've lived in Somersworth, New Hampshire all my life, but the more things you have, the greater the risk. So if you're like me, you're enjoying the blessings of marriage, or you know, and you have a child, you have a home, and you're considering all these things. You have to consider that when your workplace sends you an email asking for your pronouns. You know, we're gonna have a diversity meeting today. So that's something that you have to consider. And I'm not saying to take a cowardly approach, but I'm actually saying just the opposite. But there's a lot more skin in the game, and so it's a frightening thing to face having the work that, and we put down a lot of roots here in Somersworth, New Hampshire, this church. Are we willing to lose it all for Christ's kingdom? I actually heard somebody say that even your church ministry, you know, if you've been a pastor and you've been working there for many years, you have to be willing to lose that, not foolishly, but lose it for Christ's kingdom. Yes.
Yeah, that speaks of Pastor Welch back when he led us in the doctrinal direction into the Reform world. He basically knew more than we did that he was putting it all on the line. He knew that all could be lost. He had because he's had a bigger picture than we did, and he lost friends. He lost loyalties among his, you know, a lot of his friends just deserted him, and pastor friends too. And he knew what he was doing. He didn't know where it would end up, but he was willing to do anything for the cause of the kingdom. You know, when he said, "Lord, do it here the way you've always wanted to do it," it was not just empty rhetoric. He knew that it might mean life, it might mean property, it might mean everything.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that's going to challenge our understanding of what God's doing. We always assume we know what God's doing. We assume we know what God's doing here with Tri-City Covenant Church and Tri-City Christian Academy. But we don't know how it would accomplish his greater plan if he were to take it all away. And I'm not suggesting that he's going to take it all away, but he could. He might want to scatter this people for some reason. I don't see that on the horizon for this particular church, but you never know what God's doing. A lot of these pastors that I listen to their podcast from the CREC, they didn't just happen to live in Moscow, Idaho, or wherever they're at. They moved there, and they were seeking to do God's will. They probably had roots wherever they were, but they moved there to do God's will. So, Joe?
One of the things in working at the school over the last several years that has become more and more apparent is that oftentimes children are making the decision about where and how they're educated. And with that, with children comes and childishness, you have a lot of volatility because children oftentimes are a slave to their emotions, and there's a lot of volatility there. And so in the approach to teaching students, really trying to embed the faith and really trying to give them opportunities to express it and see how they can live out their faith, really seeing that more missionally than I think I used to, knowing that in any given year, the likelihood of having a student start and finish is much lower, than it used to be. You can look at that in a defeatist sort of a tone and say, well, I wish they were at kindergarten to 12th grade. Yeah, absolutely. But it's not always very likely. So seeing it, okay, well, we have this year, or maybe we have 2 years and 3 years. And rather than having, kind of a defeatist, well, God is probably going to send them away, and just kind of not put a lot into it. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, He might send them away. So how are we going to equip them in the time now? How as a school and as a church are we going to be offensive and be offensive during the time that they are here? Really is a critical component, I think, to our work. And we really are so poised to be very offensive in this culture, in this time that the church is losing ground. The more and more that I interact with the broader cultural and different contexts, whether it's the civil servants or even students that have no idea about what being a Christian is about, it really is a ground that they